In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the Portuguese knotted stem stitch. This is a beautifully textured stitch. It's a little bit open and twisted, plus it has these extra stitches that go perpendicular to your stitch line to give it a little bit of texture. It's really just a stem stitch where you wrap some threads around at these intervals in between stitches. It looks beautiful on curves. It's great for just adding a lot more texture and dimension to your stitches, especially if you're doing something that's almost a sampler piece in and of itself where you have a lot of different textured stitches. This is a great one to mix in. So to create a knotted stem stitch, I'm first going to start with a short stem stitch by itself. I find this just gives a better result as you start in on the pattern. So I'm going to come down a little ways along my line, leaving the loop open and to the bottom of the line. Bring my needle back up somewhere in the middle, pull it through. So now we'll start the actual knotted stem stitch pattern. I'll take another stitch down, and I find that I like the look of this best when I bring my needle back up almost entirely to where that previous stitch was. So now that I have that second stitch, I'm going to form the knotted portion. So there's these two stitches right here. Our first stitch goes down right about at this point, and the second stitch comes up right about this point. So I'm going to slide the needle underneath those two stitches right there. Pull my thread through and create a loop right there on that thread. And then again, do a second one just to the left of it. Okay. And now I have these two little loops of thread forming a knot around my first stem stitch. So again, we'll pull the thread down below our line to create a stem stitch. Go down a stitch length away. Come back up at the previous stitch. And now there's this previous stitch and that long one that crosses all the way over it. I'm going to slide my needle under there. Wrap it once, wrap it again just to the left, and there's a second knot. So again, I'll bring my thread below the line, which creates this little twist, take a stitch length down, come back up at my previous stitch, pull my thread through, and then right where those two stitches overlap, slide my needle under to create the knot once and twice. So as you can see, this creates this little open loop, this little diagonal stitch, and this little knot. So you're creating a slight twist as you work because of the stem stitch. And then you're creating those knots in between each stitch where they overlap. So one more time, bring my thread below the line to create a stem stitch. Take a stitch length away, come back up where I previously ended a stitch. I have one long stitch and this half of a short stitch before it. I'm going to slide my needle underneath that point. Create a little loop, make a second one next to it to create that knot, and that is the Portuguese knotted stem stitch.